again, I'm delighted to have a very interesting and very passionate guest, Rachel Dickens. She's the UK Programme Manager for Stronger Together. Stronger Together are the organisation that actually kicked me into touch a number of years ago with regards to the issue that we have in Scotland, but primarily because at Brightwork we thought it was a business opportunity to grow into the food sector, moving on from the drink sector. And I took on the course, or my colleague and I went to a Stronger Together course, which I'm sure Rachel will talk about. That course opened my eyes. It felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach by the end of the day. I'm sitting through that course and I knew I had to do something about it. Hence where a few years later, we have this organisation, Scotland Against Modern Slavery. So it's all thanks to Stronger Together that kicked me into touch. So before I go on any further, I'd love to introduce Rachel Dickens from Stronger Together, UK Programme Manager. Welcome.
Hello, thank you, Shan.
Delighted to have you here. As I said, Stronger Together was what started me on this journey, which it just seems to, it snowballed me into taking up some action. But, you know, anyone I've met or anyone that I've spoken to that's involved in this movement, this anti-human trafficking, this stopping labour exploitation globally or in the UK, there's something in them that's driving them. There's a passion that seems to be the fuel that keeps them going. And Rachel, there's got to be something there for you, because you wouldn't do the job you're doing if there wasn't. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what's driving you, Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment to make, to be honest, Shan. So, look, for me, ultimately, it began back in my previous job when I was first exposed, to a workplace investigation that led to the identification of a victim of modern slavery. So, coming firsthand with an individual who worked in our business that had been treated appallingly, and that really kind of opened my eyes up to the reality of this. And at the time, I was working in a business that understood this issue, that was aware of it, that took it seriously, that had started to put actions in place to address these issues, to identify, where workers may be being exploited, where they were particularly vulnerable, and for it to happen in an organisation, in a business that had, certain controls in place, really reinforced to me the reality of how prevalent it actually is here in the UK. Never mind, side where perhaps we may more commonly associate human rights abuses. So it really kind of woke me up. We spent, again, in that kind of in my previous role, I spent a lot of time working with the ethical trade team. I eventually moved over to them, but as part of that, we had worked with Stronger Together. We'd attended their training, we'd used their resources, their tools to guide our own modern slavery strategy. And from that first one, over the course of 3 years, I actually supported 20 investigations into modern slavery cases within that business, within our own operations at the time, and a number of them did result in the formal identification of victims. So that's kind of what kick-started my passion for it, as it were, and I've not really looked back since. Opportunity came up to join the Stronger Together team, and luckily I was successful in my application, and that's kind of how I am where I am now, essentially.
Wow, yeah. I mean, Rachel, that's interesting that you're talking about, because like I mentioned, there's a number of people I've spoken to that have had personal interactions with victims, and victims, I suppose, become survivors, don't they? And that's one of the drivers that I've noticed. But in your previous role, and you've working for a large UK-based organisation and you've worked in 20 investigations, it gives you a little bit of insight into, as you mentioned there, how prevalent the problem is and the issue is out there in the UK. And again, I'll go back to something you mentioned there, is that you attended some of the Stronger Together courses. It was part of your role to understand a little bit more detail about that, and I'd like to know a bit more about that now. So I've mentioned that I did the course, and that's what got me started, because I was completely blind. And I'll just tell you right now, because when I sat in that room, a number of other people, it was for me at the time, it was a tick box exercise, so that our business would be able to supply organisations that had to be part of Stronger Together. So we were just joining purely for business commercial reasons. And the emotion and the passion that doing that course, that was the people that delivered it, came through. And as I said to you, it felt like a kick in the stomach. I actually felt sick. I said, I have to do something about this. There's no way I can sit and let this happen, because we didn't know at the time that it existed in Scotland, never mind the UK or anywhere else. And here we are now. So can I ask you, just, when I'm talking about the training and talking about Stronger Together, tell me about the organisation. What is it Stronger Together do?
Okay, so, and it's great to kind of hear the impact that Stronger Together have had on your personal journey, Shan. And it's actually some of the feedback that we get from others who engage with Stronger Together is actually like, I never really understood it until now. And it really is an important priority, an important part of the way we deliver training and support to businesses, actually to win over hearts and minds. This isn't compliance with legislation. This isn't about aligning your strategy with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Ultimately, this is about protecting vulnerable people who have fallen into really, really hard circumstances and criminal activity, and enabling them to access the help and support they need. It has to go back to that human level. So to actually answer your question, in terms of who Stronger Together are, what we are, essentially not-for-profit, multi-stakeholder initiative, and our aim is to reduce modern slavery through the provision of guidance, of resources, of training, and a supportive network, a collaborative network for businesses, for them to utilize to speak to their workers, and to kind of assess their own operations, their own supply chains. Ultimately, the vision is supply chains free from modern slavery, wherever that be that the UK, be that outside of the UK, reducing forced labour, human trafficking, and other hidden third-party labour exploitation.
Yeah.
So we focus specifically on forced labour, and I've mentioned it there, but essentially what we do is we have training workshops available. We've created a whole suite of raising awareness materials that you can use with your own workforce. We have tools that are freely available to actually monitor progress, guidance on what practical actions you can actually do at an operational level to prevent this happening, to identify it, to deal with any issues as and when you find them. And we work with businesses to just help support implementation of that best practice in whatever way we can. So yeah, that's what we do essentially. And we operate, like I say, all over the UK, several programs, particularly looking at consumer goods, like you mentioned, the kind of food, drink industry, non-food. We also have programs looking at construction. So construction businesses, and the nuances of what exploitation looks in that sector. But we also have a little bit of an international profile as well. So we have programs in Spain, South Africa, and the US, looking specifically at fresh produce supply chains.
Okay. It's a big remit that Stronger Together have. And I would say now become a very well-known organisation with regards to trying to eradicate labour exploitation. I didn't realise the size and scale globally as well, but that's it's good to hear. There's a few kind of points that you talked about there about labour exploitation and forced labour, and working with organisations and providing them, I suppose, isn't it, with a kind of toolkit so that their own team can spot the signs and understand what's going on. And you also mentioned there about welfare and about workers welfare, because that's really core. If I'm right in saying here, Rachel, about spotting the signs and understanding the welfare issues that may be associated with that. Could we maybe, could we have a little chat? Because we've talked about, I've talked before about spotting the signs with Jane Bladen from Staffline and Paul McAnulty from Hope for Justice. It'd be really good to get your kind of thoughts and what should a business be looking for, when you're looking for these signs of forced labour in their workplace or in their supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of kind of documents, guidance out there on, kind of the kind of specific signs that you can look out for. But if I think from a top level point of view, key things to kind of watch out for. There's somebody I talk to frequently, one of the businesses that we work with, who summed it up really well. It's that absence of normal, just that gut feeling that there's something not quite right when you're talking to somebody, and their behavior, their body language just feels a little bit unusual, and not just passing things like that off, taking a note and reflecting on it and keeping an eye out, looking for vulnerable workers, those that potentially could be in this situation. In terms of kind of practical control points that you can put in, looking at the recruitment process is absolutely crucial. Getting ahead of this before it enters your business. So looking at what questions you're asking during the interview process, what checks you are doing on right to work documentation, on visa documentation for us going forward. But going again above and beyond the kind of, what GCSEs have you got? What experience have you got for this job? Just asking questions like, oh, how did you find out about the work here, by the way? Like, how did you come about, applying for this job with our business? Was anyone else involved in that transaction? And just doing a little bit of digging if it's not a kind of usual channel that you would expect. If it's a referral from someone in the local area, what is that relationship to that person? So recruitment process, really, really key. And a great start, a great way to catch it early before it becomes too big an issue. There's worker record checks that you can do, but again, thinking outside of the box. So going back to my days when I was in this organisation, in their manufacturing operations, I worked in HR, and we would conduct absence review meetings with people. And sometimes you'll have a conversation and you'll know that the person on the other side of the desk is not telling you everything. They've gone off sick, they've said they've had a stomach bug, but they've come back with a black eye, or their wrist is in a port bandage. And you just making the conscious effort to really kind of try dig a little bit deeper, to be a little bit more open to motivations. For example, you conduct a disciplinary because somebody's stolen a very low value piece of item within the workplace, or they had an argument. Well, what were the reasons behind that? Are they, is it pure misconduct, or actually could there be something else bubbling under the surface? Absolutely.
There's so much.
No, there is so much.
And you've covered off a couple of points that I'll come on to now. Is that one of them is that you mentioned about recruitment processes, and I understand that better than anyone because I'm living and dreaming and breathing that. But you have a situation with Operation Fort, the biggest criminal case ever with regards to labour exploitation, and the criminality behind it actually had a recruitment agent, a consultant that was implicit in the whole process, which means that they had somebody in a recruitment agency that was taking the referrals and putting these people out to work, knowing that they were being exploited, being part of that. And to me, that's the scary part, the really, really scary part, because criminality will find a way of constantly evolving. That's one thing I've learned in my involvement here. And that the scary part is recruitment, and be that direct recruitment or recruitment through a recruitment agency. How do you know as a business, just because they tell you doesn't mean that they're not caught up in this. And, you know, a business has a duty and a responsibility, if they are using a recruitment partner, to know that, because they can't. And again, the Modern Slavery Act does state this as well, is you can't offload your responsibility to a labour provider. You can't just say, well, that was my recruitment agency's problem, not mine, because it won't stick and I won't wash. Never mind the human element of this. It's the criminal element of it which comes into it. Something you mentioned there, a quote, and I know who you're talking about because we have him on a podcast, Shane Tyler. And
yes, there's Shane.
He's a truly inspirational character, and his story is just again blew my mind. But that quote you mentioned, Rachel, is Shane Tyler quote, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
For the presence of normal, it's the absence. Sorry, it's not for the presence of abnormal, it's the absence of normal. And at the hub of that, Rachel, I think what you mentioned there is the welfare of your workers. And it's no matter, you know, the way I looked at this is that when you're talking to somebody, you can talk to them about how their weekend was. And if you're not talking to workers in your plant or your production floor or whatever type of work you have, you're not talking about the social aspect of life. Why not? What have we missed as human beings? Because that's how you pick this up. Would you say that's fair and just?
I think so. Yeah. Look, I've got a HR background, so I'm always going to be on that side of the argument, as it were. And I know it's difficult. I know we're busy. I know it. You know, things like a global pandemic turn up on your doorstep, and you have to deal with that. I totally get it. I've been there. It's not easy, but we have to go back to that people-centered safeguarding approach. And that is, again, it's at the core of the guidance of the training that we provide. And I think is why it perhaps is quite effective, why it has an impact like it did on you, to really kind of sit back and go, no, do you know what? You're right. We're forgetting the actual human element of this, and going back to basics in how are people doing? Are they okay? As simple as that. Are they okay? And if not, why? And what comes out of that conversation, of that investigation, as it were. I definitely err on the side of getting back to basics, talking to people, checking in with workers, focusing on worker welfare. And that has benefits beyond modern slavery, of course, but is one key part of it. I think the point you made is about recruitment, just going back to, you know, what do businesses do? How can we actually approach it? Again, loads and loads of stuff that we've developed on the back of that need, that identification that it's such a critical area. We have all sorts of template policies, recommended checks, auditing, you know, how to assess people before they actually enter into contracts with you, setting up service level agreements. All that stuff we've got kind of behind the scenes and is freely available for businesses to pick up. It's just one part of the kind of support and resource suite that we have. And hopefully, if anyone is in that position watching this now, they feel like they've got somewhere to at least go to get a starting point.
Absolutely. And to be fair, the website, Stronger Together website, and the support and tools and the toolkit are fantastic, and they give you a really good grounding in what you need to know as a business, what training's available, but also the questions you should be asking when you're recruiting and what to look for. And it was just it's a fantastic place to look, which is kind of leads me on to, as we're coming to a close here, Rachel, is that Scotland Against Modern Slavery is this movement, this organisation. You know, we are, I suppose, effectively the corporate partners to the Scottish Government, where businesses in Scotland that are part of this will be able to work alongside the Scottish Government and advise and take guidance from the Scottish Government. Looks like legislation changes are coming from the UK Government with regards to the Modern Slavery Act as well, which will disseminate through Scotland Against Modern Slavery as well, and throughout the business community. We have partners in this organisation, Scotland Against Modern Slavery, legal partners, business partners, charities, Migrant Help are part of this, survivors of human trafficking in Scotland, where there's direct access, supposed to help victims become survivors. We've got Stronger Together are one of our partners as well, which is fantastic. So all details for Strong Together, we'll put them in the link when this podcast goes out, obviously, but they'll be on the Scotland Against Modern Slavery website, so how to contact them and pick up more information. So we're trying to centrally, as a small country, small nation, Scotland, we're trying to centrally have everything stored in the one place, so that if you're working for a company, you're working for an organisation, you feel that you want to do something and you need to do something, like sounds like Rachel and I both have at some point in our lives, is you've now got somewhere to go in Scotland, which is really, really at the core of what we're trying to do. Rachel, you've really opened up about how Stronger Together work. You've told us about yourself and your passion. It's, I suppose, when you are involved in investigations and you meet victims, it just becomes real. It's not a statistic, online. It's actually one human being that you meet and you think, oh my word, this is a problem. That changes everything. And I can see that's happened to you. So I'm proud, delighted, and you're so enthusiastic. You've got a great manner about you. So thank you so much for taking part today. We'll get all the details for Strong Together, as I said, on the link to the podcast as well. And I'm delighted you could take part. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Well, thank you so much, Shan. And honestly, what you're doing with the Scotland Against Modern Slavery is fantastic. The only way we can actually, achieve change at scale is to work together. So, great to be a part of it. Thank you for asking us to contribute, essentially, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thanks now.
No problem. Thank you.